At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. I mean, in the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name is the Voice Ogre, and let's begin. Dr. Leander Cruz had concluded that the universe, in its infinite and majestic scope, held a specific and personal vendetta against his lower lumbar region. The transit shuttle, a repurposed ore hauler that smelled faintly of ionized air and regret, had seats designed by a species that clearly bent the other way. He unfolded himself from the cramped cabin, his spine popping like a string of cheap firecrackers. The junior Kyrian researcher, all polite condescension and feathers the color of stormy twilight, met him at the airlock.
Dr. Cruz, welcome to the Tricon station. I trust that your journey was adequate.
And if by adequate you mean a 12-hour simulation of being mailed in a box, then yes, it was stellar, Cruz said, hoisting a worn satchel over his shoulder. The bag contained his entire professional life, a datapad, 3 well-thumbed print books on linguistic isolates, and a half-eaten protein bar that tasted of despair. The Kyrian's head crest, a fan of longer, darker plumes, twitched in a way that probably signified mild annoyance.
This way, please. Dr. Varro expects you.
He was led through corridors of polished, bone-white polymer, the air scrubbed so clean it had no scent, a void that made his nose ache. The outpost itself was a marvel of modern engineering, a testament to the Kyrian dedication to form and function. It was also profoundly boring. Technicians of a half-dozen species moved with quiet purpose, their faces illuminated by the glow of data streams. Cruz felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a clean room. They arrived at the main observation deck. One entire wall was a sheet of armored transparency, a window onto the black. Floating in that darkness, eclipsing the distant shimmer of a dying red giant, was the orrery. It was immense, a sphere of some dark, non-reflective material that drank the starlight. No seams, no lights, no visible technology. It was a solid question mark hanging in space. A figure stood before the window, silhouetted against the object. Tall and slender, her form wrapped in fine feathers that shifted from storm cloud gray to the metallic sheen of bismuth as she moved. This was Dr. Ion Varro, the preeminent xenoarchaeologist of her generation, and for the next 3 months, his boss. She turned as he approached, taking him in with the sharp, intelligent, and detached appraisal of a scientist examining a new and possibly contaminated sample.
Dr. Cruz, you have arrived.
In body, at least, he said.
My will to live is still clearing customs.
Varro didn't smile. Her crest shifted, a subtle tightening that he was beginning to interpret as the Kyrian equivalent of a frown.
Your reputation for levity precedes you. I will be candid. Your presence here is not at my request. The Terran Science Mandate, our primary sponsor, insisted on a human consultant. It is buried somewhere in their interspecies grand stipulations. A bit of bureaucratic vanity, I suspect.
She gestured to a massive holographic display dominating the center of the room. It showed a live feed from a probe, a close-up of the Ore's surface, and was covered, every square meter, in a dense, flowing script of glyphs, an unending, unscalable wall of text.
This is the glyphic wall, Varro said. 212 standard years of study. 17,000 attempts at decryption. We have thrown every pattern analysis engine, every quantum linguistic model, every conceivable method of logical deconstruction at this puzzle. The result is always the same. Semantic null. Gibberish.
Cruz stared at the overwhelming stream of symbols. It felt like trying to read a river. So, you've brought me in to stare at it with fresh, unsponsored eyes, then?
Precisely,
Varro said, her tone making it clear she found the idea absurd.
Make yourself familiar with our archives. Your station is over there.
She indicated a small, lonely terminal in the corner, far from the main research hub.
Do try to not disturb the actual work.
He nodded, running a hand through hair that had given up on any particular style ages ago. He walked over to the nutrient dispenser and punched in a request. A moment later, a steaming cup of synthesized protein broth was produced. It smelled vaguely of burnt nuts. He took a sip. It tasted vaguely of burnt nuts. He looked from his sad little cup to his sad little terminal to the silent artifact hanging in the void. He already regretted his decision, but the pay was good, and his student loans weren't going to forgive themselves. 2 days later, Cruz was in the audio lab, a room that felt more like a shrine to failure than a place of science. Varro stood before a console, her long, delicate fingers working the controls. She demonstrated the utter futility of their sonic approach.
The glyphs are not merely visual,
she explained, her voice echoing slightly in the anechoic chamber.
Our deep scans indicate that they possess a resonant frequency. We attempted to reconstruct the phonemes that they represent. The result is unpleasant.
She tapped a final control. A sound filled the room. It was harsh. A tonal series of clicks, rasps, and deep guttural stops. The sound of fracturing geology, of a larynx scraped raw with obsidian shards. Varro's translation suite, a powerful synthesis engine, dutifully flagged the noise with a series of red warnings. Semantic null. No recognizable linguistic structure. Probability of language negligible. The noise was grating, a physical assault on the ear. But beneath the layers of digital reconstruction and filtering, beneath the sheer mechanical ugliness of the sound, Cruz heard something else. A cadence. A rhythm that tickled a deep nerve in his memory. It was like hearing a beloved song played in a broken piano. The melody mangled, but still faintly there. One particular cluster of sounds, a sharp k, followed by a rolling r, and a soft, breathy sh, snagged his attention. It was wrong. All wrong. Without thinking, he muttered it under his breath. A corrective instinct honed over decades of study and a childhood spent at his grandmother's knee.
It's da horrella, it's
It was a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the lab equipment. A simple, frustrated phrase. That's not right at all. On the main observation screen, which linked to all labs, a single feed from the glyphic wall probe flickered. One glyph, out of the trillions covering the orrery, pulsed with a soft amber light. It glowed for 3 seconds, a warm amber in a field of cold stone. Then, a series of soft chimes echoed through the observation deck, piped into the lab's comm system. 3 distinct melodic notes. The abrasive audio reconstruction cut off. Silence fell. So complete the hum of life support seemed deafening. Varro's team was stunned. The entire outpost, which had been a hive of quiet activity, went completely still. 2 centuries of staring at an inert rock, and it had just chimed at them. Varro spun around, her bismuth-colored features flaring slightly. Her usual academic composure was gone, replaced by a sharp, demanding intensity.
What did you just say?
I said, that's not right at all, Cruz repeated, feeling the focus of every person on the observation deck. He took a long, slow sip of his nutrient broth. It still tasted of burnt nuts.
You will have to be more specific, Doctor.
Varro's voice was tight. She had him in her private office now, a Spartan room with a single perfect view of the orrery. Cruz sighed, a sound that conveyed a man stretched thin. It's a dialect, a kitchen dialect, you might call it. It's from my home region, the Basque country. It's not where I grew up, but it's where my parents are from.
Impossible,
Varro stated flatly.
My team cross-referenced every known human linguistic isolate on record. We analyzed the archives of the Euskaltzai in India, the Royal Academy of the Basque Language, We found no correlation stronger than random statistical noise. But of course you didn't, Cruz said, leaning back in his chair. You were looking for a formal, documented language, and this isn't that. This is home speak. It's what my grandmother, my Amona, used to mutter when she burnt the toast. It's what my great-uncle would say to his dog. It was never written down. It was never recorded. It just was. Varro's crest flattened against her skull. She stood motionless, her mind struggling to fit this messy, unquantifiable piece of data into her rigid worldview. A familial vernacular, an undocumented argot. The foundation of HFY technology is slang? Basically, but older, much older. What my Amona spoke was a ghost of this, right? A fragment. This. He gestured to the glyphs on the screen. This is a source code. Ait Uskara, the first tongue. She stared at him, her skepticism warring with the undeniable fact that for the first time in 2 centuries, the orrery had responded. The logic was inescapable. The logic was insane. Prove it, she said finally. She brought up a schematic of the orrery's exterior. A massive iris, easily 100 meters in diameter, was highlighted. A mortise lock of planetary scale. This is the primary entrance. It has remained sealed since its discovery. The glyphs around the aperture are presumed to be the access code. She patched him into the external comms array. We will broadcast your voice, unfiltered. Say what the glyph tells you. Cruz squinted at the screen. The symbols flowed around the great iris in an elegant, intimidating circle. It took him a moment. The structure was archaic, the phrasing poetic, but the sentiment was simple. He grumbled, mostly to himself. This is so far above my pay grade that it's in a different solar system. Your compensation will be adjusted accordingly, Varro said. Cruz took a deep breath, leaned toward the microphone, and spoke. He let the sounds form in his chest, the way his grandmother had taught him, the resonance coming from the diaphragm, not just the throat. He spoke a simple, formal greeting, a phrase so old it felt like disturbing dust in a tomb. Bidaria Hemen Da. The traveler is here. His voice, clear and living, shot across the vacuum. For a long moment, nothing happened. The orrery remained dark, silent, impassive. He glared at Varro, noting the tightening of her crest, the almost imperceptible smirk she was failing to suppress. Then, a low-frequency shudder vibrated through the outpost's superstructure. It was a sound felt more than heard. The groans of immense mechanisms waking from an aeons-long slumber. On the screen, the massive iris began to retract, its segments sliding back with a precision that defied mechanical explanation, revealing a perfect circle of absolute blackness. A gateway had opened. The air inside the orrery was still, cold, and carried the scent of deep time and sterile stone. Cruz, Varro, and a 4-person security team led by a hulking Grisk named Bao stepped through the threshold. The interior was as seamless as the exterior, vast corridors of the same dark material that seemed to absorb sound. Their footfalls made no echo. Bao was immense, his skin and texture the color of cooled lava rock. His face was a smooth, featureless plate, as Grisk's senses were based on thermal and seismic vibrations. He moved with a gravitas that suggested immense mass under perfect control. He said nothing to Cruz since they met, but the thermal aura he projected had shifted from indifferent to keenly interested. They walked for what felt like a kilometer, the only light from their shoulder-mounted lamps. Then, their path was blocked. The air ahead of them shimmered, a barrier of distorted space like a heat haze on a summer road. A line of glyphs glowed on the wall beside it with soft internal lights. A security measure, Varos surmised, her team's analysts already feeding data back. It's requesting a numeric sequence. A prime number permutation, perhaps? Cruz stepped forward, studying the glowing symbols.
He shook his head.
It's not math.
He looked at Varro.
It's a riddle.
Her crest twitched.
Hey, read that.
It asks, Cruz translated slowly.
I have no voice, but I tell all stories. I have no legs, but I travel all worlds. What am I?
Varro was silent, her analytical mind grinding against the alien concept of a lock that required lateral thinking. One of her teammates suggested data stream. Another proposed light. Cruz smiled faintly. It was a children's riddle, one his Amona had told him countless times. He stepped up to the shimmering barrier and spoke the answer, a single poetic line.
Isar batek estu prisarik.
A star does not rush. But the deeper meaning, the one the riddle was reaching for, was patience. The barrier of distorted air dissolved into nothingness, leaving the corridor ahead clear. Varro froze. Her entire methodology, her career built on rigorous logic and quantifiable data, was being dismantled piece by folk tales and linguistic intuition. She stared at Cruz, the rigid lines of her posture softening almost imperceptibly. Bao, however, just inclined his featureless head. His thermal signature, focused on Cruz, pulsed with a steady, warm wave of what could only be appraisal. He didn't need to understand how the key worked. He just needed to know who held it. They pressed deeper into the silent labyrinth. The orrery was not a dead tomb. It was a dormant machine, and they were waking it up. As they rounded a corner, Varro's comm unit crackled to life, the voice of her junior researcher echoing in the corridor.
Dr. Varro! Unidentified warship just dropped from stealth off Port Bow. They're hailing. It is the Qatar Collective. They're demanding docking clearance at Bay 3, citing the Galactic Antiquities Preservation Accord. Our instructions are... Well, we can't legally stop them.
Varro's feathers went rigid. A low hiss escaped her beak.
Those parasitic scavengers. They monitor every deep space discovery, waiting for the others to do the hard work before swooping in to claim the prize.
Bao didn't waste time with curses. He and his team moved into a defensive formation, weapons raised, securing their position at a junction of several corridors. The Grisk's calm was more unsettling than any shout. Minutes later, they heard the precise, rhythmic clicking of jointed limbs on the polymer floor. A team of 12 emerged from the corridor behind them, clad in interlocking plates of a gunmetal gray chitin that served as both exoskeleton and armor. They carried weapons that pulsed with a contained violet energy, making Bao's standard-issue rifles look like toys. Leading them was a Cathar who moved with an unnerving, non-biological efficiency. Its tall, insectoid frame was laced with sleek, integrated cybernetics that glowed with the same violet light. Its multifaceted eyes, cold and analytical, swiveled to take in the scene. This was Executor Magos.
Dr. Varro,
it said, its voice a synthesized monotone, devoid of inflection but laced with undeniable authority.
A momentous day. The Cathar Collective registers your breakthrough.
It looked past Varro, past Bao's imposing form, and its multifaceted gaze landed on Cruz. The cluster of optical sensors whirred softly as it catalogued the tired-looking academic in a functional but worn clothing.
We are here to provide oversight,
Magos continued, its tone never wavering.
The Antiquities Accord grants us the right to observe and participate in any discovery of this magnitude. I propose we pool our resources, for the optimization of the asset acquisition, of course.
The two teams faced each other down in the long, silent corridor. The air, already cold, seemed to drop another 10 degrees. The corridor ahead opened into a vast chamber. A chasm of indeterminate depth split the room, and the only way across was a series of floating platforms that shifted in a complex, unrecognizable pattern. On their side of the chasm was a control panel. Nothing more than a cluster of glowing 8 Siskura glyphs.
A bridge,
Magos observed calmly.
Inefficient.
It turned to one of its tech specialists. You recorded the human's vocal patterns at the main door, correct? Synthesize a command. Something simple. Activate. The specialist nodded, its slender manipulators tapping at a device on its forearm. A moment later, a perfect, synthesized replica of Cruz's voice echoed in the chamber, speaking a single clipped word in the ancient tongue. The platforms, which had been moving in a slow, hypnotic dance, suddenly jerked and spun. One platform shot sideways, slamming into the far wall with a deafening clang. Another tilted vertically, its surface now an unclimbable sheer face. One of Magos' soldiers, standing too close to the edge, shrieked as the platform beneath its feet vanished. And it only saved itself by firing a grappling line into the maniple mate next to it. Magos' expression, if it could be said to have one, remained placid, but a low click emanated from its vocalizer. It appears a more nuanced approach is required. Its multifaceted gaze fell on Cruz again, this time with a new predatory understanding. Varro, meanwhile, was speaking urgently into her comms.
Run a comparative analysis. Synthesizer output versus Dr. Cruz's bioscan from the main door. Full spectrum.
Cruz let out a long, theatrical sigh.
Amateurs.
He stepped up to the panel. The glyphs were not commands, but musical notations, a score for a conductor. He began to speak, not in single words, but a flowing, rhythmic chant. He spoke of rivers finding the sea, of winds navigating a valley, of stars wheeling in their ordained paths. As he spoke, the platforms responded. They stilled their chaotic dance and began to move in concert with his voice. A wide, stable platform glided to their feet. He wasn't just activating a mechanism, he was guiding it, persuading it. He was a conductor leading an orchestra of stone and light. Varro's researcher responded over the comm, her voice tight with discovery.
Doctor, the audio waves are a 99.9% match, but Cruz's scans contain a complex low-frequency resonance signature. It correlates with his cardiovascular and respiratory rhythms. It's part of the signal structure.
Varro murmured, her eyes wide.
The somasonic signature. It isn't just the voice, it's the entire living system producing it. A security feature no machine can duplicate.
Magos overheard her. Its own tech specialist confirmed the finding. The hypothesis is illogical. Our sensors detect no such signature. It is outside known physics. Magos processed this, his head tilting slightly. Inefficient biological protocols. We will proceed with the available data. Cruz guided his team across the new bridge first. Then, with a pointed look at Magos, created a path for the Cathar soldiers. They crossed quickly, their clicking footsteps losing some of their crisp discipline. A temporary alliance, Magos declared, its voice losing none of its manufactured calm. We will proceed together. My unit will provide security. The human will provide access. The next chamber they entered was different. It was smaller, circular, and the walls were covered in glyphs that were simpler, more elegant. In the center of the room, resting on a low pedestal, was a small, graceful statue of a creature that was vaguely feline, with wings folded at its back. It was a sphinge, a creature of myth.
A data archive, perhaps,
Varro said, her professional curiosity overriding the tension.
The script is less dense, less technical.
As Cruz approached the statue, the glyphs on the walls began to glow. He reached out and traced one, the stone warm and humming beneath his fingertips. He began to read them aloud, his voice soft in the quiet room. They were stories, children's stories, fables of star-faring ancestors who painted the void with new worlds, parables about siblings separated by a great cosmic distance, and the promise that one day they would find their way back to each other. He found a recurring phrase, woven into nearly every table.
Et zera, id sultsen, diren, harach.
The children returning home, This was not the grand impersonal pronouncement of a godlike species. This was a language for rocking a child to sleep, for telling tales around a hearth. He felt a deep, instinctual sense of connection, a strange, resonant echo of belonging that he couldn't explain. He was a stranger in a place that felt impossibly like home. Their progress was halted by another locked door. This one was covered in a dense, interwoven script, the glyphs overlapping and connecting in a complex grammatical web. It was a sentence of nightmarish complexity.
It is a grammatical puzzle,
Varro stated, her analytical mind immediately grasping the nature of the lock.
a logical sequence dependent on the correct syntax.
Cruz stared at it, a knot of frustration tightening in his stomach. He could understand the individual words, nouns, verbs, adjectives, but the structure was beyond him. The grammar was so archaic, so far removed from even his grandmother's dialect, that he couldn't parse the meaning. He had reached the absolute limits of his remembered vocabulary.
I can't read it,
he admitted, the words tasting like failure.
The syntax it's a fossil.
The Cathar shifted, their posture radiating impatience. For a moment, Varro looked as if she were about to make a cutting remark about the limitations of his intuitive approach. But then she paused. She saw an opportunity not for scorn, but for synergy.
Perhaps not,
she said, stepping forward.
I cannot understand the meaning, but I can see the pattern.
She activated a holographic display from her wrist projector, overlaying it on the door. Lines and brackets of pure logic encased the flowing organic script.
The Aidsinak structured their mathematics on a base 12 system. Their architecture reflects it. The star charts that they have use it. It's not unreasonable to assume that their formal grammar follows a similar principle.
She pointed to a series of interlocking clauses.
Your human languages are primarily linear. This is nested, recursive. If you treat this phrase not as a sentence, but as an equation.
She worked with a breathtaking speed and clarity, rearranging the structure not by meaning, which she couldn't guess, but by the cold, hard logic of the mathematical pattern she identified. She couldn't provide the words, but she could give him the order, the blueprint. Combining her structural analysis with his intuitive understanding of the phonemes, they rebuilt the sentence together. It was a strange, beautiful phrase, a poetic declaration about the relationship between memory and starlight. Cruz took a breath and spoke the reconstructed phrase. His voice gave it life. Varro's logic had given it form. The lock opened with a soft, satisfying click. He looked at Varro. She met his gaze and gave a single, sharp nod. It was more than an acknowledgement of success. It was the first unreserved sign of mutual reliance. The next chamber was a test of a different sort. As they entered, the floor plates beneath them hummed, and the gravity began to fluctuate wildly. One moment they were pinned to the floor, struggling to breathe. The next, they were nearly floating. The exit on the far side of the 100-meter room, but the path was a treacherous, invisible minefield of gravitational shears. Bao reacted. He moved to shield Varro and Cruz. His immense, dense frame, a living anchor against the shifting forces.
"Stay behind me,"
he rumbled, the vibrations calming in their certainty. Magos's unit was less composed. One of the Cathar, a younger soldier whose movements were less precise, panicked. During a moment of low gravity, it made a break for the exit. It was halfway across when it ran into a high G shear. It was thrown sideways and slammed into the wall with the force of a hydraulic press. It crumpled to the floor, its chitinous armor cracking audibly under the strain, and didn't move again. Cruz watched the other Cathar. Not one of them looked at their fallen comrade. They simply adjusted their stances, their focus locked on Magos, waiting for the next order. Magos showed no reaction, no flicker of regret, no moment of shock. It simply watched, its optical sensors recording the event.
"The variable has been eliminated," it said, its voice flat. "The optimal path is now clear. Move when I say move."
It raised its subordinate's fate as a data point. Cruz and Varro recoiled at this casual brutality. Magos was not a rival. It was a predator, and it would sacrifice any component of its machine to reach its goal. A heavy, dangerous silence settled between the two groups, broken only by the hum of the fluctuating gravity plates. After navigating another series of corridors, they found a small, secured antechamber that seemed inert, a safe place to rest. The Alliance, fragile as it was, held for now. Magos's unit posted guards, their movements efficient and cold. Varro conferred with her remote team, analyzing the data they collected. Bao stood near the entrance, a silent, immovable guardian. Cruz found a spot against a wall and slid to the floor, the exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. He closed his eyes, the endless glyphs still swimming behind his eyelids. He ran a hand over the cool, seamless material of the wall beside him, tracing a symbol he recognized, the word for hearth. His mind drifted. He was not in the orrery anymore. He was a small boy, sitting in his Amona's kitchen in a small village nestled in the Pyrenees. The air smelled of garlic, olive oil, and baking bread. She hummed an old song, a tune in Aitz Euskara he now recognized as one of the fables from the archive chamber. Her voice was thin but warm. Her hands, gnarled with age, deftly rolled out dough on a floured countertop. She was the last one, the last of her generation in the village who spoke the old way, the Sukaldeko Hitskunza, the kitchen language. Everyone else moved on to Spanish or standardized Euskara. To them, it was a relic. To her, it was the sound of home. He remembered the diagnosis, lymphoma. He remembered the slow, urbanized decay of the illness, the way it stole the resonance from her voice before it stole her breath. The language almost died with her. He pursued linguistics to honor her, to keep that small part of her alive. But years of bureaucratic frustrations, of fighting for funding for a field most people considered useless, had buried that passion under a mountain of cynicism and doubt. He opened his eyes and looked at the glyph for hearth. This was not an academic exercise anymore. It wasn't about a paycheck or a prestigious discovery. He wasn't just translating a dead language. He was speaking her memory back into the universe. He was telling the stars her stories. And for the first time in a very long time, he knew exactly why he was here. They finally reached the heart of the orrery, the nexus. It was a vast spherical chamber, its interior surface a perfect star field that slowly rotated around them. It felt as if they were standing in the very center of the galaxy. In the middle of the chamber, floating in zero gravity, was a single, massive obelisk of black stone. It was covered in the most complex, interwoven web of glyphs they had ever encountered. Surrounding the obelisk was a shimmering, powerful energy shield that crackled with contained power. This was the final lock, the master control. The moment they were all inside, the alliance ended. Magos and its unit moved quickly, surrounding Cruz, Varro, and Bao. They raised their weapons, fully charged and humming with violet light. "Human," Magos said, its synthesized tone now holding the sharp edge of a cutting laser. "You have been an invaluable asset. Now you will complete your task. Open the Nexus." "I believe a finalization of our operational parameters is in order," Magos continued, stepping closer. It gestured with its weapon towards Varro. "Open the Nexus, human, or I will begin terminating non-essential biological units. I will start with the Kyrian. Their functions are irrelevant to the objective. Comply, or they will be terminated." Varro's crest flared in defiance.
Do not do it, Leander.
Her voice rang with unexpected strength.
Do not give this technological vulture the keys to our collective history.
Bao subtly shifted his weight. His body coiled like a spring. His thermal sensors locked on Magos, calculating angles and velocities. He was ready to act, but he knew the odds. Cruz ignored them all. His entire world narrowed to the floating obelisk and the river of script that flowed over its surface. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a hero. He was a linguist, and this was his battlefield. He recognized the form. It was a poem, an epic, lyrical poem, a lament for scattered children, a desperate, hopeful question sent out into the silent dark, and a promise of reunion. It was a call, waiting for its response. He took a deep breath and began to recite it. His voice, quiet at first, filled the vast chamber. He spoke the ancient words not as a scholar, but as a bard, letting the rhythm and the meter carry the weight of eons of longing. With each verse he spoke, the energy shield around the obelisk flickered, its light pulsing in time with his words. The starfield on the walls seemed to brighten, the distant nebulae growing with soft, sympathetic light. Cruz reached the final line of the poem. It was not a statement, but a question. A question filled with a hope so profound it bordered on pain. He looked at the obelisk, and he asked it, his voice resonating with a genuine, heartfelt feeling that came from a place deeper than memory.
Kure harak extian al daude.
Are our children home? The shield around the obelisk wavered, its energy thinning to a translucent, shimmering haze. The final barrier was moments from dissolving. Magos saw its chance. It was a being that believed technology was the only true power, and biology was a messy, inefficient flaw.
Now,
It ordered its tech specialist. The vocal synthesizer on the specialist's forearm sprang to life. It replicated Cruz's final phrase with perfect digital fidelity. The pitch, the cadence, the volume. It was a flawless copy of the sound waves. The dead, synthesized echo of the question struck the weakened shield. Instantly, the shield flared back to full, blinding strength. It pulsed with an angry crimson light that emitted a harsh, defensive tone. A shriek of alien outrage. The orrery, a machine built on the subtle, living resonance of its creators, reacted to the sterile, lifeless signal not as a key, but as an attack. Before Magos could issue another order, the obelisk itself flared with a brilliant white light. A figure materialized from the light, coalescing into a tall, radiant being made of starlight and memory. It was an Atzinak, rendered in a form so perfect it seemed solid. It looked at the assembled beings, an ancient, patient eyes finally falling on Cruz. Varro, the scientist and skeptic, could only stare, her analytical mind silenced. She stepped forward, her feathers quivering, and addressed the being with the most formal, respectful greeting she could construct from her own research. A stilted, academic approximation of the high tongue.
Greetings, honored ancestor. We come in peace, seeking knowledge from those who came before.
The being tilted its head, its expression patient, but its eyes held a faint, distant confusion. It didn't seem to comprehend the stiff formality, the worshipful tone. Cruz watched the exchange, and something inside him, a knot of exhaustion, exasperation, and sheer cosmic absurdity, finally snapped. He was done with puzzles, threats, and academic posturing. He looked at the glowing figure of humanity's oldest ancestor, a being of unimaginable power and wisdom, and his sarcasm, the last defense of a man perpetually out of his depth, took over. In the casual, familiar etz escura of his grandmother's kitchen, the dialect of burnt toast and family gossip, he said, "You still speak that dialect?" A slow, warm smile spread across the being's face. A look of immense, relieved recognition. It responded in the same intimate, easy tongue, its voice like the chiming of distant bells.
it is the only one that matters. Our children have finally found their way home.
The nexus hummed with power. The starfield on the walls blazed with light. Tendrils of pure energy white and gold, erupted from the obelisk. They moved with gentle, deliberate purpose, harmlessly enveloping Cruz, Varro, and Bao in a warm, protective embrace. Other tendrils, swift as lightning, lashed out at Magos and his soldiers. They were a targeted electromagnetic pulse, specifically and intelligently homing in on their active weapon systems and invasive, non-integrated cybernetic implants. Magos's violet augmentation sparked violently. Its weapon overloaded with a loud crack and fell from its numb manipulators. It clattered to the floor, twitching. Its soldiers followed, their chitinous armor freezing, their weapons going inert, their comm systems frying with a final burst of static. The star field on the ceiling shifted, the familiar constellations dissolving and reforming. It became a vast three-dimensional galactic map. Then, thousands, tens of thousands of points of light flared into existence. They appeared in Kyrian space, in Grisk territory, and the unclaimed voids between the great powers. Each point of light was tagged with a single undeniable marker, a human DNA signature. Varro stared, her beak parted in silent revelation. Her entire conception of galactic history, of humanity as a late-arriving adolescent species, crumbled into dust. Humans weren't late to the galactic stage. They built the stage, populated it, and then somehow forgot their own address. They weren't newcomers. They were the landlords. The Aidsenak gestured to the sprawling map. "We did not scatter you," it explained in the warm, familiar tongue. "We planted you. You are a garden, grown in 1,000 different soils. This orrery is a key, one of many, a way to open the gates between the disparate parts of our family." Beyond the obelisk, the fabric of space began to shimmer. A swirling vortex of light and color opened, a stable, shimmering portal. A gateway. Bao, the stoic Grisk warrior, emitted a low, resonant tone from deep within his chest, a sound of profound reverence that vibrated through the deck plating. Varro met Cruz's gaze, her sharp eyes filled with an emotion that he had never expected to see there. Awe. It was apology enough. He accepted it with a simple, tired nod. He looked from her to the neutralized Cathar to the glowing map of his long-lost family, and finally to the swirling vortex of the portal, a gateway to 1,000 unknown cousins, 1,000,000 forgotten stories. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the weariness of the journey finally giving way to a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Well," he muttered to Varro,